In our previous video, we were talking about how challenges can be a gateway to understanding our belief systems, and how belief systems are the lens in which we're seeing reality. By shifting our belief systems, we can fundamentally change the way that we're perceiving reality and start to live in a world that's much more beneficial towards us. In this system, I want to break down this concept using a practical example. We'll see how we can identify a pattern of challenge in our life, how we can then see the core belief underneath that pattern, and then start to loosen the grip that this belief is having on our life. So let's get started. Let's say that you're seeing a pattern in your life where you're having a hard time receiving constructive criticism. At the end of a meeting, your boss pulls you aside and just casually mentions, "Hey, next time I would love if you send me a few more emails tracking your progress throughout the project." This was a small piece of constructive criticism, but you find your chest tightening. You find this need to overcorrect, to do more, to make sure that you'll never repeat this mistake again. Let's say your friend mentions, "Hey, next time you're running late, do you mind just shooting me a text so I can better plan my day?" Again, instead of receiving this as some form of constructive criticism, you find this urgency in your chest. You find this need to over-justify, to tell your friend that, "Hey, the subway was broken, it wasn't my fault, I'm not usually late, I swear." Again, instead of being able to receive these things as small pieces of constructive criticism, you find yourself emotionally spiked. You find yourself in a state of over-justification, of self-judgment, of shame. And this is how you identify a pattern in your life. You can see how some small comments are causing big emotional weights within you. And that's how you can see that, okay, maybe this is a pattern in my life that's no longer serving me, because underneath this pattern, I'm holding a belief that's no longer serving me. So now that we've identified this pattern, the next step in this process is to understand what core belief is living underneath this pattern, and how can I try to find the root cause of this pattern in my life. In order to do this, I like to think of myself as a detective and start to ask self-inquiry questions about why I was feeling the way that I was, and start to get really honest with myself and to keep digging deeper and deeper until I feel like I've hit the core belief that's causing this emotional spike. So let's practice with this example. I would start by asking myself, so when you did receive these pieces of constructive criticism, what's the first thing that you actually felt? Well, when I received the criticism, I felt really judged. I felt very seen, and I felt like people were just pointing out my flaws. Well, that's really interesting. Why do you think that that feeling of judgment bothered you so much? Well, it felt like people are just judging me and focusing on my flaws, and they're focusing on everything that I did wrong. And I don't like that people are just fixated on all the things that I'm doing wrong and all my flaws. That's very interesting. Why do you think it's so important for you that people don't fixate on your flaws? Well, I mean, I don't like when people think that I'm flawed, and I don't like when people think that I'm a bad person, and I don't like when they just think that I'm not good. Well, that's very interesting. It feels like you have a really hard time if someone perceives you as not good. Why do you think it's so important for you that people see that you are a good person? Well, I don't want people to assume that I'm a bad person, and I don't want people to assume that I'm flawed, because if I'm not a good person and if I'm a bad person, then they won't want to be around me, and they'll start to push away and they'll start to reject me. Interesting. So, do you think that you have a core belief here that says that if you are flawed, if you make a mistake, then people will reject you? Well, yeah, if I am flawed, if I am not good, then I will push people away because no one wants to hang out with someone or no one wants to hire someone who's bad, right? Well, you see, underneath this fear of criticism is this core belief that says if I am flawed, if I am not always perfect, then people will judge and reject me. Can you see how we started off with this fear of criticism? And under that fear is actually this core belief that says that if I am flawed, then I cannot be accepted. If I am flawed, then I cannot be loved. And if I am flawed, then people will reject and move farther away from me. Can you see how this core belief is what's manifesting all of these different emotional spikes? How this core belief is why you couldn't receive that constructive criticism easily, and why your body started to feel tense instead of being able to just see it as constructive criticism. This is how you start to slowly identify the core belief that's running underneath the emotional spikes and patterns in your life. Now comes step 3 of the process. Once we've identified the core belief, the next step is to poke holes in the argument of this belief, to see how this belief is actually fundamentally very illogical. And once you can see that this belief is illogical, it can loosen the grip that this belief has on you, has on your emotional reactions. So how can we do this? One thing I like to do is come up with counterexamples. So in this belief that says that if I am flawed, then people will reject and move further away from me, can I think of a time in my life where I was flawed, where I did make a mistake and people didn't actually leave? In the case of your boss saw a flaw where you were not giving enough updates. Now, because of this flaw, did your boss fire you? Did they reject you or did they push you away? No. You still have your job, you're still a valuable part of the company, and you're still surrounded by people who truly value your work. That one flaw, that one mistake didn't push people outside of your life. As for your friend, when your friend asked you to message them when you're late, just because you were late that one time, did that friend want to stop hanging out with you? Did they suddenly drop out of your life? No, you still have plans to see them next week. You can see how that logic in that belief is not really true because you have examples in your life where you were a flawed human being and people still accepted you and people were still wanted to be around you. That's step 1 of seeing how this belief that you're believing is not really true and is not really 100% logical. Another cool thing I like to do with these beliefs is to see how a lot of these beliefs are contradicting and paradoxical in nature. Let's start with this belief that if I am flawed, then I am not going to be accepted. Well, isn't it true that all human beings are flawed? Isn't it true that everyone makes mistakes, and what makes human beings so interesting and so complex is that we have a bunch of these different flaws. In fact, don't you think that letting someone see your flaws and truly being vulnerable enough with someone to see your flaws is an actual invitation for them to get closer to you, not farther away? When someone is able to see your flaws and when you can share that vulnerability with someone, it's actually an opportunity to build a deeper connection with that person. It's an opportunity to move your friendships and your relationships from surface level conversations where everything is perfect and unflawed to deeper conversations where they can see you as a complicated human being and still love and accept you. Your flaws are not actually pushing people away, but actually become an invitation for them to see who you really are, and actually a way to pull people closer to you. In this way, you can see how this belief is pretty paradoxical. It's contradicting itself and is actually quite illogical. The more you play with this game, the more you try to poke holes in the logic of these negative beliefs, you can see how they're not really true. And once you see the illusion, once you see that these negative beliefs are not true, they're not fundamental truths that you have to continue to believe, they can start to loosen their grip. Once you start to loosen the grip of these beliefs, you can see how your perception changes. How the next time your friend mentions some sort of constructive criticism, you're not clenching your chest that much. You're not having that same emotional spike. You're saying, hey, maybe this can be an opportunity for us to deepen our connection by becoming more vulnerable. I hope this example was really helpful to show you a practical way that you can see and identify patterns in your life. How you can sit with those patterns and try to understand the core belief under those patterns by using self-inquiry questions and digging deeper and deeper. And then once you've identified those core beliefs, using different strategies to see how these beliefs are very illogical and contradicting in nature. And how by seeing the illusion of these beliefs, they're slowly going to start to loosen the grip that they have on you. Thank you.